Introducing the Nikai Region, a brand new Pokemon Fakemon region set in Japan and based on Japanese yokai. Now, a yokai is kind of a general term used in Japan for anything that's supernatural, like ghosts and spirits and monsters, and each Pokemon line within this dex is based on a yokai. Now, I didn't know anything about yokais before starting this video, and I've done a lot of research and I've learned a lot as well, and it's super interesting. Now, this is created by Nikai Region, who you can find on Instagram, and I'll link them down in the description for you to go and check them out. As always, let's jump in and choose our starter Pokemon. The grass starter is Abelia, and it's actually a grass and bug type right out of the gate. Now, this is based on a bee, but also on the Camellia japonica, which is a flower that kind of gives that orangey red coloring on the skirt of the Pokemon here. It evolves into Camabee, which is now getting to that adolescent stage, and it's interesting. It almost got like a bit of a crown shape on the top of its head there. And then lastly evolves into Beamelina, which is now a grass and psychic type, and we can definitely see the crown on the top of its head being that queen bee. Now, this line is also based on the Furutsubaki no Rei yokai, and I'm going to butcher a lot of the names for the yokai, so I apologize in advance. He's a yokai that's said to grow and inhabit a camellia tree. The fire type starter is Lagaxita, which is based on a Japanese gecko. It looks very cute with its tongue sticking out like that. And then evolves into Tungekko, and you can see that tongue is definitely a prominent feature now. It's sticking right out. And it's almost kind of got like that Japanese hairstyle with like a top knot. It then evolves into Venozumi, which is now a fire and poison type. Now, the yokai that this is based on is Akaname, which is a yokai with a really long tongue. And it's actually kind of gross because it uses that tongue to lick up the grime and filth of bathtubs and bathrooms and places like that, which is very disgusting. Actually, what Lickitung is based off as well, with that long tongue, of course. But this also combines elements of the Yakuza and all those tattoos that it has on the arms and legs as well. And then next, the water type starter is Cracab, and this is based on a Japanese crab, but it's also based on samurais as well. So keep an eye on the helmet as this Pokemon evolves and how the helmet changes. It evolves into Mizu Crab, and as you can see, that helmet is kind of getting more of that traditional samurai helmet kind of shape, which is very distinguishable. And then lastly evolves into Kanamurai, which is now a water and ghost type. Definitely has that samurai kind of expression there. And I love how the claws are very different as well, especially that bony kind of claw. And this is based on the Haikagani yokai, which are crabs that actually have distinguishing features on them that give them the face of a samurai. Now, traditionally, if a fisherman caught one of these crabs that had a samurai face on it, they would throw it back into the water to give respect to the samurai. Now, let me know down in the comments which starter Pokemon you're going to pick. I am going to choose Cracab, the water type starter. All right, let's move on through the region now. Now, the Route 1 rodent is Hatito, the pure normal type Pokemon, of course, based on a mouse. And I love how like the hair is covering its eyes. It looks very cute. It evolves into Ratesso, which is now a normal and steel type Pokemon. And this is based on Tesso, which is a rat yokai that's claws and teeth and nails are as hard as steel. So it's awesome that this is part steel type to match that. Then we have Tajina, which is a pure dark type Pokemon. This is based on the Japanese badger. It's kind of interesting how it's holding a stick there, and expression is very interesting as well. It then evolves into Maksugu, which is now a dark and fighting type. It is based on Mujina, which is a yokai that's based on a badger, and it has developed magical abilities and can shapeshift, which it uses to trick humans. This Pokemon definitely has an angry expression on it, and I love that it's got a stick as well. Then next we have Takute, which is a pure fairy type Pokemon, and this is based on the Tanuki yokai, which is a forest spirit with magical powers like being able to transform itself, which a lot of yokai are able to do, able to transform or shapeshift in some way. But it definitely has that kind of raccoon dog kind of look in this as well. It evolves into Totanuki, which is now a fairy and psychic type Pokemon. And I love that this is also based on Totoro, which is my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. And it's even got the little leaf on its head like Totoro as well, and the pattern on its chest, which is very cool. Now going into the Route 1 bug, and it is Kyurem, which is a pure bug type Pokemon. Now this is based on the Silkworm. It's also based on the Bombix Mori, which we're definitely going to see as it evolves. It evolves into Pumori, which is that traditional kind of cocoon Pokemon that we see with our Route 1 bugs. And then evolves into Cinchouga, which is now a bug and dragon type Pokemon. So it's now fully evolved into that Bombix Mori, and it's also based on the Shinchu yokai, which is a giant silkworm moth that can become as big as elephants, and it actually eats demons and evil spirits. But this Pokemon definitely has a kind of calm and relaxed vibe going on here. Next, the Route 1 bird is called Sparchi and is a pure flying type Pokemon. And I love that it kind of looks like it's got a black mask over its eyes, which is very cool. Evolves into Scarrow, so you can definitely see that it sounds a lot like Sparrow. That is the bird that it is based on. But definitely has a kind of like evilish kind of vibe. I'm not sure if it's like the mask or the eyes or the coloring. But then lastly evolves into Pasazume, which is now a flying and ghost type Pokemon. Now this is based on the Yosuzume Yokai, which are very rare birds that often stay together in large flocks, but they are known to swarm people. And if they swarm you, it's said to bring you bad luck. But it's also got like a third eye in the middle of its head there as well. So kind of got a very creepy vibe about this bird. Next is Tabuto, which is a pure bug type Pokemon. And this is actually based on the Japanese Rhino Beetle, as you're definitely going to see as this evolves. And it's also based on rice fields. So you can see a little bit of mud with a little tiny sprout on the end of its horn there. And then evolves into Mewpupa, which is now a bug and ground type Pokemon. Again, that kind of cocoon look that we have from Middle Evolution Bug. And then lastly evolves into Besadoro. So now it's become much bigger, like a Japanese Rhino Beetle should be. It's got lots of little rice grains and rice sproutings across its entire body, but mainly on the back there. But it's completely covered in mud. And this is now based on the Dorotabo Yokai, which is a yokai which is actually the ghost of an old man that was toiling away in its muddy rice field. Okita is a pure electric type Pokemon. It is a very cute looking dog. I like this one a lot. This is specifically based on the Akita Inu, which is also a very cute puppy. And I love the look on the tail here. I think it definitely matches the look of the Akita Inu very well. It evolves into a Raw Inu, which has now gotten much bigger. It's interesting how it's got that blue coloring now. It's very prominent on the back legs, but also on the tip of the ears, as well as the nose, and almost like a little bit of an eyeliner around the eye. And then lastly evolves into Raycanus, which is now an electric and ice type. So you can see that blue coloring has formed into an ice type. It still has that giant tail, which is now almost as big as the rest of the Pokemon. Now this is based on the Raiju, which is a yokai that is an enormous beast that often comes in the form of a wolf or a dog or something like that, which is known to be the embodiment of lightning within a yokai. And Raiju is also the inspiration for Raikou as well. And Raikou definitely matches the description of that yokai. Then Sakado is a pure poison type Pokemon, which is next, which looks really interesting. It's actually based on a tick. It's almost got like a bushy beard around it, which is very cool. It then evolves into Encephatic, which is now a poison and psychic type. Now this is based on the Nurahion, which is a yokai which depicts as an old man with a really elongated head, kind of like what we can see here in this Pokemon. And the yokai is said to not look like it's much because it's based on that elderly man, but it's actually extremely intelligent and extremely powerful. So that's why we can kind of see the shape of this Pokemon here. It does look like it has a big head because it has a big brain and is very intelligent as well. Next, we have the Pika clone of the region, which is a very unique Pika clone to what we see in a lot of other Fakemon and Pokemon regions. This is Nobarisu, which is actually an electric and dragon type Pokemon. This Pokemon looks absolutely huge, but that's because it's based on the Nobasuma, which is a yokai that's based on a giant flying squirrel. So although this Pokemon isn't flying, it does have the dragon type, but it is giant. Then next we have Tadpound, which is a pure fighting type Pokemon, obviously based on a tadpole. That tail is huge though. It almost looks like a hand. It evolves into Muskeros, so now the tadpole has changed into a frog, of course. Definitely kind of looks like a fighting type. It almost looks like it's got a belt around its waist. And even just the hands, it looks like it's ready or it's prepared for a fight. And then lastly evolves into Sumo Gama. Of course, based on a sumo. Definitely looks a lot like a sumo with its size, but also the look around the waist as well. Now, this is based on the Ugama Yokai, which is a giant fighting frog which can disguise itself as a human. So all those themes coming together work really well for this Pokemon. Next is Bleasel, which is a pure steel type Pokemon. This is based on a Japanese Weasel. It's got really sharp claws, giving it that steel typing. Its expression kind of makes it look like a bit of a placid Pokemon. And although it's very calm, it doesn't shy away from a battle. And then evolves into Kamaclaw, which is now a steel and dark type Pokemon. So this is actually based on the Kama Itachi, which is a yokai with claws that are strong as steel and as sharp as razors. So this definitely looks and sounds like a Sneasel. So Sneasel and the Kamaclaw definitely have a similar kind of vibe, but actually look quite different. I think I prefer the look of the Kamaclaw. I think its face and the fur around it is a really nice look. Barney Lua is a pure fairy type Pokemon. I think this looks very cute. An adorable little bunny. And I love the markings that it's got on it as well. It's got like a kind of yin-yang crescent moon kind of look over its eyes, with one of those eyes being green. And then evolves into Ramuna, which is now a fairy and ice type. So the distinct coloring is really interesting. We can see a big crescent moon marking on its belly there. And this is based on the Gyokuto Yokai, which is a story from Japan, but also from other cultures as well. Whereas the dark markings on the moon are said to be a rabbit. So the Gyokuto Yokai is a rabbit that is said to live on the moon. Then next we have Squirrel, which is a pure bug type Pokemon, which looks a lot like a scorpion, but it's got a really interesting look over the face, and that's because it's also based on Kendo. Now, Kendo is a Japanese fighting martial art, which uses sword and armor. So that's why it looks like it's got like a bit of a helmet or a mask over its face. It evolves into Kendo Pion, which is now a bug and steel type Pokemon. There you can see the sword or the weapon that it used from Kendo, and that mask is now fully developed over its head as well. And it's also based on the Amakiri Yokai, which is a shrimp that can actually fly and has really sharp claws, which is also the inspiration for Gligar as well. Now, this Pokemon doesn't really look like Gligar. It definitely focuses more on the weapon side of thing and the Kendo side of thing. Then next is Strone, which is a pure rock type Pokemon, which looks really interesting. It hasn't got any arms and it's missing an eye, but it has got that flat rock on the top of its head, and that's because it's based on those sacrifice stones. It evolves into Rorofa, so now it's become much bigger. It's still got that mysterious eye and vibe to it, but it's starting to grow a little bit of an arm there. And then evolves into Tumbertone, which is now a rock and ghost type Pokemon. This is definitely looking a lot bigger now. Almost gives it like a golem kind of look with the massive front legs that it has. Now, the yokai that this is based on is Sesho Seki, which is a boulder that's within a large field that's filled with toxic gas, which definitely has a kind of ominous feel to it, which I think we're getting from this Pokemon as well. Then next we have Zana, which is a pure ground type Pokemon, obviously based on an elephant here. It does look very dirty. It is a ground type, but it's got like the dirt on the tips of the ears and the trunk and everything as well. But the design on its back is quite interesting. And then evolves into Yumifan, which is now a ground and psychic type Pokemon. Definitely has that dirty, muddy look across the entire body, and that mound is now a mound of sand that's on its back, which is really nice. It is based on the Baku Yokai, which has the body of a bear but the head of an elephant, but the yokai is known as a protector of humans, and it actually eats bad dreams. And it's also what Drowsy is based on. Kind of got that elephant trunk but feeds on dreams. Definitely sounds like a Drowsy. Then next is my Otter, which is a pure dark type Pokemon. This looks very mischievous. I think the expression is kind of like hiding a bit of a giggle. Of course, this is based on an otter, but it has the word mimic in the name as well. Me Otter, mimic, and otter together. And then it evolves into Rikawalso, which is now a dark and water type Pokemon. It's kind of got like that Asian kind of straw hat on its head, which is nice. Now, it is based on the Karalso Yokai, which is an otter that within old age has developed magical powers. It can shapeshift and it can mimic sounds, which it uses to tease humans. So that's why it's kind of got that mischievous kind of vibe, but it's actually not dangerous. It's just a bit cheeky. Next is Shaikuma, which is a pure normal type Pokemon, obviously based on a bear, and the word Kuma is bear in Japanese. And then evolves into Onikurso, which is now a normal and poison type Pokemon. Now, this Pokemon is much, much bigger because it's based on Onikuma, which is otherwise known as the demon bear. Now, this is a yokai that continues to grow and grow and grow and never stops and actually becomes bipedal. So that would be very scary, and I think this is giving a very scary kind of vibe as well. Then next is Foalma, which is a grass and fairy type Pokemon, and there's two together, so I kind of see it like Tandem Mouse. But these are very cute Pokemon, and these are actually based on the Kadama yokai, which are like little forest spirits, and generally are very shy and try to hide away. Then next is Druma, which is a pure dragon type Pokemon. Now, this is based on a Kirin, which is a yokai that's kind of an amalgamation of lots of different animals. It has like a deer body, and we can kind of see some little antlers there, but it's got dragon scales all over it as well. And we can definitely see the dragon scales on this Pokemon, of course, the dragon typing as well. And then evolves into Kiriyuma, which is now a dragon and steel type Pokemon. Now, this yokai is known to be very regal and very elegant and doesn't harm other animals. And it is extremely powerful with a mane of holy fire. So it doesn't have fire, but we can definitely see that mane is very prominent on this Pokemon here, all the way down its back. So this has really got an interesting vibe of almost like combining a horse with a dragon together. It's really cool. Now, I think Nanika is very cute. It's a pure grass type Pokemon, obviously based on a banana, but I think it looks so cute. The banana peel almost looks like arms coming out, which I think is very cool. It evolves into Lana Juice, so now those arms kind of have banana leaves all over it, but it's definitely got a very creepy expression. I think the eyes and just the whole face is very, very creepy. And then evolves into Basha Nana, which is now a grass and ghost type, and the expressions kind of change. It's not so much creepy now. It almost looks very worried or distraught in a way. And that's because it's based on the Basho Nosei, which is a yokai that appear as a human face within banana leaves. Generally doesn't cause any harm, but can be very frightening if you're looking at a banana plant and then you see a face in it. Then next we have Chikiri, which is a fire and normal type Pokemon. Now, this is based on the Onagadori chicken, which are those chickens with really long tail feathers, and we can see the tail is quite prominent here on this Pokemon as as well. It evolves into Galazan, which is now looking a lot bigger. Its body shape is almost like an egg, actually. It doesn't actually have wings. But that front tooth coming up through the beak is kind of interesting look. And then lastly evolves into Basanlisk, which is now a fire and dragon type Pokemon. It's developed those little wings now. But if you have a look at that beak, it's got a very big, sharp, almost like a tooth on it. That's because this is kind of based on a basilisk. But of course, it's based on a yokai, and that yokai is Basan, as you can tell in the name. But a Basan is like a fire-breathing rooster. Fire and dragon is a very cool combo for a Pokemon, and for a rooster, you wouldn't think it, but it looks really, really cool. Next, Mashero is a pure water type Pokemon, and it kind of looks like a little imp, and you can see it's holding that shell there. It evolves into Kongsumi, and while it's still holding that shell, it's actually become part of a shell as well. It's now become a water and rock type as well because of that shell. And then lastly evolves into Tritrumpa, which is now a lot bigger now. This is based on the Shushubora yokai, which is a sea snail that becomes a yokai after a very long time, and the snail actually kind of changes into a dragon that lives within that shell. So we can definitely see this Pokemon does kind of look like a dragon. Next, Mamuxic is a pure poison type Pokemon. This is based on the Mamushi Viper. It looks very cute for a little snake at the moment. And then evolves into Uwaboa, which is now a poison and dragon type, so obviously become a lot bigger now. Now this is based on the Uwabami yokai, which is a giant serpent with an insatiable appetite and just keeps eating. But this is known as the Earthquake Pokemon because of how large it is. Then Overboo is a ghost and normal type Pokemon, which is a very interesting type combination. Definitely looks a lot like a sheep, but definitely has an interesting vibe. It is a ghost type, but those eyes are very, very creepy looking. It evolves into Shibabu, so it's become bipedal now, and this is actually based on the Betso Batsusan, which is a yokai that is formless, so you cannot see it, but people can hear it coming. It sounds like wooden clogs walking down a road. And if you have a close look at the feet, they do look like wooden clogs. I wonder if it's based on a sheep because of the kind of counting sheep aspect when you're trying to fall asleep at night. Then next is Sansala, which is an ice and ground type Pokemon. This is based on the giant Japanese salamander. I absolutely love the really bushy kind of hairy fluff that it's got on its head, and it's completely covering its eyes. I first thought that these were the eyes and they're really small, but it's not. That's actually part of the nose. It then evolves into Salamoto, which definitely has a different kind of vibe now. Its eyes are definitely showing here. The tail that it's got is massive, just like the Japanese giant salamander. It's based on the Hanzaki yokai, which is a giant salamander with a massive mouth. So it definitely gives me vibes of like a Quagsire and Clodsire as well. I think they're based on that. And like we had the Earthquake Pokemon before, this is known as the Avalanche Pokemon, again because of its giant size. Then next we have a very interesting Pokemon. So we have Shiro, which is a pure flying type Pokemon, and this is based on the White Crow, but it has a counterpart. Its counterpart is Kuro, again of pure flying type, but this is now based on a Black Crow. So they look very similar, but if you have a Kuro and your friend has a Shiro, you trade them with each other, and both of them will evolve together into Corviog, which is a flying and psychic type Pokemon. Obviously got the black and white together, and it's now become a two-headed crow, and that's because it's based on Yogen Notori, which is a yokai which is known as the Prophet Bird. It has two heads, and it is known for talking to humans to tell them when there is an incoming disaster. Then next is Kajelf, which is a fairy and fighting type Pokemon, and this is based on an elf, but more specifically it's based on the Kijimuna yokai, which is a little elf that kind of has that red coloring, and it likes to live and around trees. Then next we have Raruga, which is a rock and grass type Pokemon. So I love how this Pokemon's almost got like a bit of a pot plant or a vase on top of its head with those leaves coming out. It's got a bit of a grassy kind of skirt as well. And then it evolves into Kappa, which is now much bigger now. It almost looks kind of dangerous. I love how it's got almost like those tribal elements, I suppose, with like the leaves coming out the arms and around its neck and its head and everything like that. But this is based on the Kappa yokai, which are sort of half reptilian, half humanoid yokais. And it's actually what the Lotad line are based on. But I think this Pokemon looks really cool. Then next we have Nyor, which is a pure dark type Pokemon. Even just saying that is very cute. Obviously sounds like a little kitten. Very cute. And I love the coloring that it's got here as well. Really, really nice. And then evolves into Bakanya, which is now a dark and fire type. It's got two tails, and that's because it's based on the Bakaneko. And the Bakaneko is a very old cat that has continued to grow and become very, very large. It's got two tails, just like our Pokemon here, and it actually walks on two legs. It is bipedal. But I think the design of this Pokemon looks very, very cool and definitely fits the Bakaneko yokai very, very well. Now that is half of the Nikai region, but the other half is still to come. The artist is still working on it, so make sure you guys go and follow them on Instagram, which is linked in the description, to go and see the rest of the region as it comes out. Now let me know down in the comments what your favorites were, but my favorites were Kanimura, the water type starter, Koviog, Banalura, and Kappa. I thought they were all really interesting, and I've learned a lot about yokais in this video, and I hope you guys have too. If you enjoy Pokemon and Fakemon videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out some of these videos too. Cheers.